Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2015 Child Count webinar training. My name is Dr. Carmen Rowland, and I am currently the director of the Specialized Education Data Team within the Data Accountability and Research Division here at OSSE. We are glad that you could join us today for our 2015 Child Count training, where we would like to go over with you the process for Child Count for this school year, the timelines and the deadlines and the activities that you will need to complete in order to have a successful child count presentation. Joining me today are my colleagues, Ms. Kathy Ash and also Ms. Leah Diggs-Natico. They will also be assisting me with the presentation today and sharing some knowledge with you about the child count process. The webinar is being recorded today and will be posted on the OSSE website as well as the SLED's resource site. In addition to us presenting today, if you have any questions, please use the questions box in the chat box in order to ask your questions. And as I mentioned, there are 3 of us today doing this webinar, so while we're talking, others can answer your questions as the presentation is going on. And if you have questions outside of the training that are just not, you just didn't have a time to ask or they weren't answered, please feel free to submit a ticket in the OSSE support tool or reach out to us using the email address osse.idea@dc.gov. So before we get started with the training, just a few reminders. A copy of today's webinar slides will be available for download on the SLED's resource site. During the webinar, you're encouraged to ask questions by typing in the question box. And after we finish this webinar today, a follow-up email will be sent to all LEAs that will include a link to the recording as well as other resources for you for the child count. The child count data collection is a federally mandated activity per 34 CFR section 300.641A that is reported annually and serves as the official special education enrollment number for the District of Columbia. The timeline for the 2015 child count data collection process is as follows. During phase 1, LEAs attend training, which you're doing today. Phase 2 is actually where LEAs get to access their data, review their data, and work to resolve all child count data anomalies. Phase 2 takes place from August 31st through November 24th, 2015. Phase 3 is where LEAs sign and submit their data anomalies acknowledgement form by October 7, 2015. And in phase 4, LEAs submit their signed certification form and child count roster to OSSE by December 11, 2015. The major steps of action that LEAs will need to take are as follows. LEAs will review and correct their demographic and special education information for each student and confirm accuracy of all data no later than October 5th, 2015. Once you've confirmed that your data is accurate and that all of your information is included and correct, you will then submit a signed data anomalies acknowledgement form by October 7th, 2015. Once you reviewed and resolved your anomalies, that process will be up until November 24th, 2015. And then when you're all finished and ready to complete your certification form, you will submit that to OSSE no later than December 11, 2015. On this slide, we wanted to share with you the different data systems that are available to you throughout the process in order for you to access your data and also to communicate with OSSE about any issues that you're having during the process. The first data system is the SLED, our statewide longitudinal education database. That is where the child count data will be found. SEDS is our special education data system, and that's where you will enter any information around special education for your students and that's where the IEP process is. Any students that are going through the eligibility process, those students and that information is done through SEDS. And we also have the 2015 Enrollment Audit QuickBase application. This application is used for the collection of data not captured by your LEA Student Information System or SEDS, and it also will be used throughout the audit for the upload of residency, resolution, appeals, and limited English proficiency documentation. The SLED Data Quality Error Report. This allows LEAs to see data errors in a student's enrollment and or demographic record, and it actually will help to prevent the student from appearing accurately in the enrollment audit roster verification or child count data roster in SLED or in SEDS. And so if you have any data errors, this report will help you understand why certain students aren't appearing on your rosters that you believe should be appearing on your roster. You can go to this report and look to see if they're not appearing because their ethnicity is missing or their date of birth is missing from your LEA SIS. The OSSE support tool is the the system that OSSE uses that allows LEAs to enter requests for support for the purposes of correcting or updating enrollment audit or child count data, and any questions that you have about functionality in SEDS. This is available to the LEA special education points of contact, enrollment audit points of contact, or LEP points of contact. And then finally, we have the SEDS resource site, which provides many guidance documents and resources on the use of SEDS, and it also highlights, in terms of child count, the process for how to complete an IEP amendment. That would be one of the resources that you may need to use during the child count process. Now I would like to switch and talk to you about the statewide longitudinal education database. This is where you will find all of your information for the child count process and enrollment audit process. In order to access your child count data in SLED, you would need to navigate to sled.osse.dc.gov. You can use Chrome or Internet Explorer or any internet browser to get there, as long as you enter that HTTPS. That S has to be there in your web link, in your web browser. Once you are in SLED, you will log in with your SLED credentials, which if you don't have SLED credentials, you'll need to email sled.info@dc.gov. And before you can receive your username and password, you would need to attend a training by the SLED team in order to get those credentials. So once all that's taken care of and you have access to the system and you're there and you've logged in, you would navigate to Programs in the top panel, and the Enrollment Audit Report options are shown in the drop-down menu. So once I navigate to Programs, then I go to Enrollment Audit, which is in the top menu, and I see LEA Summary, Student Level Data, and Document Upload. The LEA Summary provides a summary of your student roster for your entire LEA. The student level data is actually each individual student listed that is on your roster, and then Document Upload is where you would go for this year to upload your certification form and also student roster for child count. And we'll review that during the training. So once you navigate there, you will click on student level. And once you click on student level, it'll bring you to this page here. And this is where you see your enrollment audit, your enrollment audit UPSSF population, the child count tab, and also the non-public population. In order to view your child count roster and data, you click on child count, and that information will populate for you below. And we have instructions here for you in order to know what's expected of you as you're doing this part of the process to review your data. So that was SLED, and that was just how to access your roster. We'll revisit SLED when we talk about the certification process in a few slides. Now I'd like to walk you through the actual data that you'll be verifying for the child count process. There's demographic data, and there's also specialized education data. So the first is verifying data that's demographic information and what you need to check for to make sure that it's correct. So your USI, or student USI, all of this comes from your LEA SIS. So if it's inaccurate in the child count roster within SLED, that means it's inaccurate in your LEA SIS, and you would need to work with your enrollment audit point of contact or your LEA data manager or your registrar in order to make sure that information is populating correctly. So the USI, that's the 10-digit USI assigned by OSSE and SLED. The first name of the student, that's the student's first name, the student's last name, their date of birth, the student's age as of 10/5/2015, the actual count day. The student's age is calculated from the date of birth as of 10/5/15. The student's gender, their grade, their race, their limited English proficiency status, and also the attending LEA as of October 5th, 2015. So you would want to review and correct the student demographic data that was on the previous slide. If any of the student demographic data is inaccurate, the data should be corrected in the LEA's student information system. The data is collected nightly from the LEA SIS and reflected the next day in OSSE systems. So if you make a correction today, you will not be able to see that corrected data until tomorrow morning. You would want to work closely, as I mentioned before, with your LEA's data manager or registrar to ensure that all data is accurate and up to date in all systems. The next set of data that you would want to make sure is accurate and verify is your specialized education data for each student that is in your child count roster. So the primary disability category as of October 5th, 2015, the date of the most recent IEP. We also have the IEP event date, and that is the event date that from which the services are pulled. We have the date of most recent eligibility as of October 5th, 2015. The total hours outside of the general education setting is the hours for all specialized instruction and related services prescribed on the IEP delivered outside of the general education setting. The field total hours inside general education setting is the hours for all specialized instruction and related services prescribed on the IEP delivered in the general education setting. Total hours, this is the hours for all specialized instruction and related services prescribed on the IEP regardless of setting. The percent outside of the general education setting, this is the total number of hours prescribed on the IEP divided by the total number of school hours by week. The educational environment comes from the least restrictive environment page within the IEP process in SEDS. If a student has a dedicated aide, that is the indicator that will be shown yes or no, and that should come from the student's IEP within SEDS and the dedicated aide hours. If there's a dedicated aide included on the student's IEP, the number of hours per week the aide is assigned will populate in the student's in your LEA's child count roster. So in order to verify your data, your special education data, you will need to review and correct all student information, make sure it's accurate. All special education data elements should be corrected and updated in SEDS with the exception of the educational environment. Please make corrections to the educational environment using the 2015 Enrollment Audit and Child Count QuickBase application. You will begin the review process as soon as possible to allow ample time for the completion of IEP amendment meetings and/or annual IEP review meetings as needed. So everyone, all LEAs were granted access to their child count and enrollment audit data on Monday, August 31st. So by today, it's Wednesday, that's 2 days ago, you should be looking in your data and making sure that it's populated and ready and correct. And if there are any errors that are there, you should be working in your source systems, either in SEDS or in your LEA SIS, to make sure that information is correct. The child count data will be based on student enrollment and educational environment data as of 5 p.m. Monday, October 5th. That is the lock date. If you need to do an IEP amendment for any students, please refer to the IEP amendment policy when making changes to the IEP. And we have the link for the policy there in that in the fourth bullet. And when we send these slides out, you'll be able to access that link. Now I'm going to turn over the presentation to Ms. Leah Diggs-Natiko, who's going to walk you through the OSSE support tool and how to use that system during the child count process. Thank you for your time.
Hello. So I'm going to talk about the OSSE support tool. Everyone should already have access to it. You can go to the OSSE support tool via octo.quickbase.com. So the OSSE support tool is a QuickBase application that is used to submit requests for support to OSSE. The OST, it's only available to SEDS, LEA, special points of contact, heads of LEA, enrollment, audit points of contact, and LEP points of contact. SEDS, LEAs, special education POCs, have access to enter issues about anything related specifically to SEDS. Other OST users have access to enter issues specifically related to enrollment or enrollment audit. There are two specific instances where information should be entered into the OST. IEP amendments that are completed after October 5th, 2015, and if a dedicated aid information in child count is not accurate in SLED. If an IEP amendment is completed prior to 10/5/15, the data will automatically be captured in child count in SLED. If you need to contact OSSE via the OSSE support tool, you'll use the website that I mentioned earlier. You're going to use your login information, and you're going to come to the home page, and you'll see these request options. If you click on Add Request for Support, that's where you will go to put in a ticket. You will send OSSE a question or issue. If you click on Request Transfer of Student Records, and this is for independent LEAs only, that's where you will request transfer of records to your LEA SED site. If you need to review the status of a submitted transfer request, you'll click on Review of Transfer Request button. Again, this is also for independent LEAs only. Dependent charter LEAs should go through DCPS Help Desk to resolve any issues with SEDS. Once the user has accepted the suggested solution offered by the state, the user should inform the state by checking the box below that the issue has been resolved. To confirm the issue has been resolved, click on the edit icon next to the request. Check the box above the issue description to inform OSSE that the issue has been resolved. To enter clarifying information, use the issue description box. I would like to also note that if OSSE has a question for the LEA, that we ask you to please respond promptly, or else this delays response by OSSE. If you need to contact OSSE regarding an IEP amendment, you would go to Add Request for Support, and the following information we would need: the student USI, the student last name, the student first name, and the student date of birth. In the issue description box, we would need the IEP amendment date, the IEP amendment event date, the child count data elements that need to be updated for child count. Also, please note, all IEP amendments completed after October 5th for the purpose of correcting child count data should be submitted to OSSE in the OSSE support tool by the LEA Special Education Point of Contact. If you need to contact OSSE using the OSSE support tool for the dedicated aid information, we would need the following information: the student USI, the student last name, the student first name, the student date of birth, and in the issue description box, we would need the dedicated aid indicator appearing in the Child Count tab within SLED, the dedicated aid hours appearing in the Child Count tab within SLED, the correct dedicated aid indicator, which is what the response should be, the correct dedicated aid hours, what the hours should be, a brief description regarding why this information would be needed to be updated outside of an IEP amendment. And now I will turn this over to my colleague, Kathy Ash.
Thank you, Leah. Good morning, everyone. I am going to dive into the process for submitting your certifications and completing the process for the data anomalies acknowledgement. Before starting, though, with that, I want to speak with you about the educational environment. The environment selected for students will be displayed based on the least restrictive environment section in the IEP process in SEDS. If you find that the educational environment is missing or inaccurate in SLED, then you should make the correction in the school year 2015-2016 IC Enrollment Audit and Child Count QuickBase application. And on the screen is a display of a screenshot of where that feature is once you click on the child count information. Next, you want to select the educational environment, which should be displayed in the SLED child count roster as well. We want to remind you to please be sure to select the appropriate educational environment for the students placed at non-public schools. Typically, those environments are separate school or residential. If this is not the correct environment, then you want to update the information via the Child Count QuickBase application. The Child Count Data Anomalies Acknowledgement and Certification Process. OSSE will conduct an in-depth analysis of all data that you submit to find the following, although it's not limited to: duplicative enrollment across the LEAs, students with missing demographic information, students that are not ages 3 through 21, students with the primary disability of developmental delay older than 7 years, and discrepancies in the educational environment, as I just shared with you. Also, we will be looking for, or if you receive an anomaly regarding students with excessively high or low hours, the high being greater than 35 or the low being less than 0.5, it's really to bring your attention to that information. We're not saying or suggesting that it's right or wrong. We just want to make sure that you are aware. So as a result of the analysis, LEAs will receive a report of all of the issues identified in your data. And if you receive one or more issues through OSSE's analysis process, corrections should be made, and the LEA is required to certify no later than December 11th, 5 p.m. Now again, the anomalies process, our process is a little different this year, and I will explain that a little further in the presentation. We have a new process. This year, rather than you certifying twice, you will verify that you have anomalies by having your head of school sign the data anomalies acknowledgement form, and you will certify your count by December 11th. And again, I'll go into that further. So to access an anomaly, you want to click on the description label column. You want to just click on the description, which is located in the label column. And once you click on the description, you want to click on the pencil icon and it will take you to the identified anomaly workspace to provide a response. And this is just an example. What you see now is just an example of what that screen will look like. This is your workspace. The anomalies will be identified, and then there is an area for the LEA to respond. In this case, the anomaly is dedicated 8 hours, and you have the description. So if you want to change the data, you will click yes, and there will be a drop down box will appear which says that the dedicated aid indicator checkbox is what you want to change. You want to make sure that you include the IEP Amendment event date and the IEP Amendment event ID. Now here's what's new this year. The Child Count Data Anomalies Acknowledgement Form. LEAs are required to submit the form signed by your head of school no later than 5 p.m. Wednesday, October 7th. If data anomalies are not resolved by the specified time, the LEA will be issued a finding from the Special Education LEA Monitoring Team. So it's very important that you get these anomalies resolved by the specified time. In preparation for certification, you want to be sure that all the students listed were receiving services as of October 5th. Be sure that all demographic and special education information is accurate for all students, and you want to make sure that the educational environment indicated is accurate. Hopefully, you have been able to begin accessing your anomalies. If not, as soon as you receive them, you want to review and work to resolve all data anomalies no later than November 24th to be considered timely. For those of you who have done this before, done this process before, you know that there was a shorter window, I know, last year. So this year we're giving you upwards of 2 months to complete the anomalies, and there will be staff persons assigned to various LEAs to assist with this process, and that's from now until December the 11th. Now, the review by OSSE of the LEA certification includes the following. We are going to review the certifications to ensure that they're signed by the head of LEA. There should not be any handwritten corrections on the certified roster. Also, the number of students entered on the certification form are required to match the number of students on the certified roster report. If you find that there isn't a match, you have trouble with that, we encourage you to submit your inquiries through the OSSE support tool that Leah described to you earlier. The table on the certification form has to be completed in its entirety, and the date the certification form signed by the LEA should be no earlier than October 6th. And the reason for that is because the data freezes on October 5th. Now, accessing the data anomalies acknowledgement and certification form. Again, you want to navigate to SLED using the sled.isc.dc.gov address. And as Carmen indicated, this year you want to make sure that you put HTTPS. You want to add the S. You click on the Reports tab. You select the Enterprise Reporting System menu option. You input your SLED credentials. And once you are logged in under the Enrollment Audit and Child Count Reports, you want to select the Enrollment Audit Data Certification. After that, you'll download the report and complete all necessary information. To submit the certification form, again, they are due by December 11th, no later than 5 p.m. You do the same thing that you did with accessing the form. And you navigate to the sled.osce.dc.gov. You log in with your credentials. You click on the programs in the top navigation panel, and then you select the document upload menu option. To submit your certification form, you want to click on the Enrollment Audit Certification tab. Browse and upload the completed and signed certification form by 5 p.m. on December 11th. And displayed is a screenshot of what that looks like. The child count data certification submission. As you've heard throughout the presentation, December 11th is a very important date. LEAs are required to certify that all child count information is correct via SLED no later than 5 p.m. Friday, December 11th. And also, we'd like for you to remember, especially those, particularly those LEAs that are, or students attending dependent charters, DCPS will certify the data for students with IEPs, for students attending dependent charter schools. And the reason we do this is because these LEAs have elected DCPS as their LEA for special education. Two primary reasons that failure to submit timely documentation could result in. It could have an impact on local determinations and an impact on funding. We encourage you to follow directions for submitting the child count certification as outlined in the OSSE Enrollment Audit and Child Count Handbook. Here's a screenshot of the child count data certification form. Again, no handwritten notes on the form. It must be signed, or it should be signed, by the head of the LEA and dated. And also, we indicated that it should be completed in its entirety. Now, you may not have students 3 to 5 years of age attending your LEA. So those columns should be checked no. And the same thing applies for ages 6 to 21. A few frequently asked questions. What is child count? It is a federally mandated activity that is reported annually, and it serves as the official special education enrollment number for the District of Columbia. What is the official child count date for LEAs? The official date is no later than 5 p.m., October 5th, 2015. Where do I submit the data anomalies acknowledgement and certification forms? Both forms must be submitted in SLED in the enrollment audit section. Another question is, how can the LEA special education points of contact register for SEDS training? The LEA staff can register for the SEDS training by clicking on the URL that you'll be able to find on the SEDS resource site. Who should I contact if a student does not appear in SEDS as expected? You want to contact your LEA's registrar to ensure that the student is properly enrolled in your LEA, Student Information System. If it's determined, however, that the student still is not showing in the system, you may submit a request through the OSSE support tool for further assistance. As a recap, the LEA child count steps are: you want to review and correct your demographic and special education information and confirm accuracy of all data no later than October 5th. Submit your signed data anomalies acknowledgement form by October 7th, and you will have between now and November 24th to access, review, and resolve all anomalies. And finally, you will submit a completed and signed certification form along with your roster no later than December the 11th, 5 p.m. This concludes our 2015 Child Count Data Deep Dive webinar. We have been getting quite a few questions through the chat, and we're responding to them. If you didn't submit a question and you realize that you have something later, please be sure to email ideadata.dc.gov, or you can submit your inquiry through the OSSE support tool. Thank you again for your participation, and please be on the lookout for upcoming trainings. And we look forward to working with you and you having a very successful school year. Thank you kindly.